Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Calgary Foundation's information session about the Spring 2024 cycle of the Community Grants Program. My name is Bessa Dudu. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be presenting with my colleagues, Ingrid and Dowdy. We are part of the grants team at Calgary Foundation. This session will be recorded, and we will post the link to the recording on the Community Grants page on our website. So we would like to start this session with a land acknowledgement by acknowledging that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, Ohio Nakota Nations, the Otipemisiwak Métis Government of the Métis Nation within Alberta District 6, and all the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. We've got a video to play for you, which is a land acknowledgement video put together by Calgary Foundation.
What is land acknowledgement?
Those of us that are continuing our oral history are blessed. What we shared, that was told from way.
We were part of the ecosystem. We were not masters of it.
You know, after we grow up from our biological mothers, the earth becomes our caregiver. Everything that we need is there.
We were raised to believe that everything has a spirit and that everything around us is alive and has a purpose.
The spirit of the land and our spirit. You can't separate land and people.
In Treaty 7 territory, I'm accepted, I'm something, and I'm with my people.
We honor our ancestors by acknowledging Treaty 7 territory. We acknowledge the Treaty 7 nations, the Piikani First Nation, the Siksika First Nation, the Kainai First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. We acknowledge the ancestral territory of the Siksikaitsitapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, and the home of Métis Region number 3.
So you can find this video on our website in the long and short versions. It is meant to be a community resource, and you're welcome to use and share it. So now, to start us off, we would like to know who's here with us today. And we do encourage you to rename yourselves to your organization's name. We also have a very quick poll we would like you all to take, just to indicate if you're here representing a registered charity, a nonprofit, or other groups. And it's a very quick poll. Can we pull that up? So during today's presentation, we will go over just an overview of the Community Grants Program. We would look at eligibility, so who can apply and what you can apply for. We would also look at partnerships and collaboratives and who can apply for a partnership or a collaborative application and how to do so. Then we would look at reconciliation and equity. So who we mean in the application where we refer to equity deserving communities and how we use the data you provide in the application. And then we will look at how to apply. So this would include things like the application form, either you use the written, video, audio, or oral applications. And then we will look at the community grants process. So timelines, how applications are assessed, and who assesses them. At the end of this, we will have time for questions and answers. Please use the Q&A function to enter your question, and we will answer them at the end. If you have a question that you feel is specific to your organization or proposal, I encourage you to book some time with one of us so we can go over it in detail, one-on-one, as opposed to trying to answer it all here. We will enter the link for the bookings towards the end. So as I said earlier, this session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the Community Grants page on our website. And we can share the results of the poll. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so now let's look at the community grants overview. So the community grants program covers a broad scope of projects aimed at strengthening the charitable sector and engaging citizens. So over the past few years, we have made some adaptations that reflect the ongoing effects of the pandemic and our commitment to reconciliation and advancing racial equity and systemic change. The program is open for applications twice a year, the spring and fall cycles. So we are now accepting applications for the spring 2024 cycle, and the deadline for submissions is Wednesday, February 21st at 4 p.m. So we expect that the need for funding will remain significantly higher than our available resources. So now let's look at eligibility. So we have three main criteria to determine eligibility to apply for the Community Grants Program. So firstly, the Community Grants Program can only accept applications from registered Canadian charities and other qualified donees. You can go to the Canada Revenue Agency's charities listing website to determine whether your organization is a qualified donee. If you're not a registered charity, but wish to apply for funding, you can consider one of the following options. So you can make a formal application to CRA to be able to apply for charity status. So our capacity building team does have resources available to help you determine whether applying for charitable status makes sense for your organization. Do note that obtaining charitable status from CRA does take a while, so this option won't be applicable for this particular cycle. So you may also establish a formal relationship or partnership with a registered charity that you have a working relationship with and whose mission aligns with yours. The application will be made in partnership, with the charity being the main applicant. Later on in the presentation, we will discuss more about partnership applications and their implications. And so the next main criteria for eligibility is as Calgary Foundation is a place-based community foundation, we do support initiatives that will significantly benefit Calgary and area communities. So which includes Calgary, Banff National Park, the municipal districts of Bighorn, Foothills, Kananaskis, and Whitland, Rocky View County, and the surrounding First Nations of Treaty 7. So for the third eligibility criteria, each organization can have one current community grant for their own work and one to support a partnership or collaborative. So when applying to support their own work, the charity must have completed and reported on any previous community grant or pandemic recovery grant. And when applying in partnership with a nonprofit society or grassroots group, or as a collaborative of at least 3 organizations, the charity must also have completed any previous grants on any of those previous partnerships or collaboratives. And so next we want to look at what activities are eligible for the Community Grants Program. So Community Grant covers a really broad range of activities falling into 3 main categories. So you can see the existing programming, new and expanded programming, or organization development. So you can apply for existing programming or new and expanded programming. Both of these include salaries, program materials and equipment, communications, spaces associated with programming, and accessibility considerations. One thing to note, though, is that groups can only apply for existing programming if they have an annual operating budget under 4 million. There will also be some additional questions about why funding from Calgary Foundation is important at this time and for a limited period for your organization, knowing that we don't tend to fund any organization on an ongoing or renewal basis. So we also fund work focused internally on organization development. So this would include things like staff wellness strategies, consultant fees, professional development, technology, software, and also costs associated with partnerships or merger exploration. So basically, activities that will make your organization stronger and help deliver on its mission or strengthen the sector more broadly. Please note here also that the cost associated with hiring new staff to deliver programs will be covered under either the existing programming or new and expanded programming. And now we look at activities that are not eligible for community grants. So we have activities that do not align with Calgary Foundation stated values. So you can find these values on our website. So annual events or event series. So for example, symposiums, gatherings, and conferences. So research, so purely academic research is not supported by community grants. And so when we refer to participatory action research, it means that the subjects of the research are also driving the nature and the direction of the work. So we would need to know about, the role of the community partners and how much agency the community partners have in determining the direction of the research, who owns the research results, and more importantly, how the results will be activated in community. So next on the list is fundraisers activities and fundraiser salaries, debt retirement and endowments, religious services, or proselytizing. For this, however, we do from time to time fund faith-based organizations for work that they're doing to support the broader community. So for instance, let's say the food bank. So as long as promoting or participating in that faith does not play a role in the project and the people to be served go beyond the regular members. So now I will pass on to Dowdy to talk about some of the frequently asked questions and also charity, non-charity partnerships, as well as the reconciliation and equity section of the application. Over to you, Dowdy.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Bessie. So during this process in regards to the community grant application, during this time, we meet with numerous organizations and they have frequent questions regarding the community grant applications. And here are the common ones. So I'm going to go by each one to provide you as much depth of information. So one of the questions that we frequently get asked is, what is the maximum grant amount? And in terms of the community grant, there is really no prescribed maximum or minimum amount that can be requested in a community grant application. Rather, we encourage organizations to apply for the amount that will make their project successful, while also bearing in mind that the Calgary Foundation's community grant program has an allocated budget. Therefore, we generally tend to receive the overall asks exceed the available amounts. So in some cases, amounts may be reduced. So for example, a multi-year request may be reduced to a single-year request. So generally, the average request size for a community grant program ranges between 70,000 to 75,000. Now, another question that's normally asked regarding our community grant program is, how long can a project duration be? And here, you can determine the project length or work within your budget. Generally, the project length for our community grant programs are generally from a year and a year and a half. Then lastly, another question that we get asked is, when must activities occur? And for this, for applicants who are successful, you will hear from us by July 1st, 2024, in which the grant will cover costs incurred after July 1st, 2024. Now, if you have a grant that begins before that, that is okay, so long as you have a portion of funding that covers those costs. Now, let's talk more about partnerships. All right, so here we're going to talk more about charities and non-charities partnering. And generally what we see here is that charities and non-charities will often partner to do two things. One, increase their impact in the community, or two, extend their reach, often with equity deserving communities. So let me provide an example. So as an example, in regards to a partnership, we may have a youth serving charity that may want to partner with a non-charity youth group to offer a summer camp program. Here, in this partnership scenario, the charity will have the ability to reach more youth groups, while the non-charity group will have the ability to provide some activities that may not be available for a specific group. Now let's talk more about collaboratives. So when we're talking about collaboratives, here we're talking about multiple organizations. So to be exact, we're talking about 3 or more. So this is generally between charities and non-charities who share a similar objective on a project, which is normally larger than one can do on its own. Now, for both these cases, we encourage you to contact us to determine eligibility. Now, these grants are exception to our one-at-a-time grant rule. And at the Calgary Foundation, we truly believe in collaborative work. Therefore, we do not want to penalize a charity that is looking to be a backbone to an organization or support another organization's work. These grant exceptions are to ensure that a charity is not applying for multiple grants for their own work. Now, let's talk more regarding the partnership application process. In this case, the registered charity must be the party that submits the application. Now, through our online grant portal, they can create an account in which they can provide access for the non-charity group to also work on the application. This provides the opportunity for both the charity and non-charity to work together on the application. Now, if you do happen to receive funding for a partnership, this means there's a legal relationship between the charity and non-charity, and therefore you will need a legal form of partnership. Now, it's very important to understand in regards of the partnership agreement, there's some key features that will be important for the charity. Now, as part of the partnership agreement, the charity will need to do two things to demonstrate. One, they'll need to demonstrate that the funds being used will be going towards the intended charitable activities that align with their own missions work in some way. Two, the charity must also demonstrate that both active existing organizations have a relationship. Now, these two features are to help ensure that charity A maintains their charitable status, but B, also ensure that charity is not simply acting as a conduit or transferring without any oversight or involvement. Now, if approved for the grant, ultimately, it's the charity that is held accountable. Now, during the community grant application process, we have a partnership section. Now, in this partnership section, we also ask specific questions for the both respective organizations, particularly A, what's their relationship and role to the project, as well as we also include a partnership agreement template in which we ask you to outline the information in which you plan to exchange information between both organizations and transparency. And also, we also provide a useful guide within our application called the Better Together, in which this Better Together guide is really phenomenal for especially charities and non-charities that are looking to do a partnership, as it provides a great resource and guide to go through a partnership together. Now, let's talk more about equity-deserving communities. Awesome. So in the application form, we have a specific question. We have a specific section to reconciliation and equity. And here we ask you to identify your organization's relationship with equity-deserving communities. So when we refer to equity-deserving communities, here we're referring to groups who are marginalized by societal structures and often experience social and financial disadvantages as a result of systems of oppression. And you may have heard of equity denied or equity seeking. And therefore, during this process, we get asked lots of questions from organizations, particularly how best to answer these questions. And that may result in organizations asking if this may impact their grant eligibility or the success of their grant. And today, I'm here to provide some more additional context. At the Calgary Foundation, we understand that these communities face barriers such as obtaining charitable status and seeking stable funding, which is another reason why we're in support of partnership, as it presents an opportunity for charities and non-charities to provide more support for equity-deserving equity groups. Another way that we're trying to do better is by collecting and analyzing data to help us understand who we're serving, but most importantly, help us identify the gaps and develop strategies to fill those gaps. So within the equity deserving community section, we have three main questions that we ask. And here's one of the first questions that we ask is, one, we ask you to inform us about your organization's mandate and leadership, as well as we ask you to select the 4 categories here listed that best suit your organization. So I'm going to go through each category and provide you different examples. So for led by and for, here we're looking at organizations' missions in which they're primarily to serve a specific equity-deserving community, and therefore their identity is at the center of their service/program delivery and with the leadership at all levels. So an example of this is that for these situations, the organization in terms of leadership, board of directors, and the people who they serve are specific to this equity-deserving community. Another category that we have here is focus. So within the focus, this is where this applies to organizations in which the organization collaborates with equity-deserving communities directly responsible to this community. And this community is part of the leadership. So some great examples that align with focus will be organizations in the disability sector or in the health, where both these, particularly in the disability sector, where they may not be initially led by individuals in that equity community. However, they do have members in the leadership from that community. And the individuals who are leading it have close relations to those in the community. But they also have strong collaborations with other disability sectors in the community. Another category is serving. So in serving, here we're looking at an organization in which they have established strong diversity, equity, inclusion practices. And therefore, the equity-deserving community is largely among the service users and supports causes of the community. Now, an example of this would be the Calgary Foundation, where here we support causes of equity-deserving communities. But it's not really specifically our missions. But we're not specifically focused on equity-deserving communities, as it's not part of our missions work. And then lastly, we have not specific. So the organization's mandate to serve a general population. A great example of this would be I belong to a sport organization in which the focus of that organization is to really generally support the majority of the general population. Now, looking at this list, we also understand that these 4 distinct categories do not capture all the nuances and may not reflect your organization. Now, let's look at the second question that we have within our reconciliation and equity. So here, we ask organizations to identify the community which best applies to you. Now, as part of the Calgary Foundation's data strategy, here are the following populations. Now, we also understand that some people may belong to multiple equity deserving communities, and therefore may often experience overlapping, interdependent discrimination and disadvantages. So your organization may fall into the multiple categories listed here in terms of Indigenous people, Black racialized people, 2S LGBTQIA plus community, and people with mental health, physical, or intellectual disabilities. Now, this is very important, as at the Calgary Foundation, we also understand that this list is continuously exhaustive and evolving. And therefore, we understand that people may face we also understand there's different levels of discrimination, such as ageism, sexism, and also economic factors that impact people. But for our data purposes, this is the current population that we're focusing on. Now, let's move on to the third question that we ask. So here, we're truly trying to understand your organization's equity journey. And so here we ask you to indicate your organization's characteristics as well as your practices to help us understand how your organization is approaching equity in your work. Now, I encourage you to consider your choices here in a relation to the categories above. So if you're only checking off one or two practices related to equity, therefore, this most likely will put your organization, which falls into the category of non-specific or serving categories. Now, that is it for me for this point. I'm now going to take this opportunity, pass it along to Ingrid, who will talk more in terms of how to apply for a community grant program.
Awesome. Thanks, Dowdy. So Bessie and Dowdy talked a little bit about who is eligible to apply. I'm going to talk now about how to actually apply. So your first step really should be to go through the program guidelines carefully, take a look at what we fund and what we don't, and then you are welcome to book a conversation with one of us to discuss your project or your program or the initiative that you'd like to apply for. There's a link on the Community Grants website that takes you right to a booking calendar, and you can choose the time that works best for you. It's totally optional. You don't have to talk to us, but we recommend it. We like to talk to you, and especially if you haven't applied before, it's really a good idea. When you're ready to start working on the application, you'll need to go to Calgary Foundation's online grant portal. That's also accessed through the Community Grants webpage. And once you click apply on community grants, you will see a number of, you'll see a form essentially to fill in. The first part is basic questions about your organization. So your mission, your annual operating budget, how many staff or volunteers you have, things like that just help us understand who your organization is and set the context for the rest of the application. Following that, we ask for a bit of an overview. So you'll choose a project title, keep it short, 5 words or less, the amount you'd like to request, start and end dates, and a few sort of basic questions, drop-down menus, that kind of thing. The next part is where you really get into describing your initiative. This is the most important part of the application. So there's a number of questions here. The first one is about the rationale for the work. So why do you want to do the project? What informed it? And what will the funds help you to do? The next question is around the delivery. So this is your how. You'll give us some details on all of the activities that you'll be doing, key dates, that kind of thing. Just tell us about how the work will unfold. The next section is about evaluation and success. What you hope to accomplish through the time period of the grant, and how you'll know if you're accomplishing that. And then finally, your relationships. So tell us who you're working with, who you're learning from and sharing as part of the project. You'll also need to complete a budget. So in that section, just be sure that the amount you're requesting from Calgary Foundation and the total expenses And all the numbers there match what you've put in the grant overview as the amount requested. At the beginning of each section of the application, there's some instructions, some guidelines, and there's often some examples of what we're looking for there. So do take a look at those as you go through. I also just want to note that for organizations or initiatives that are Indigenous-led or led by an equity deserving group, there's the option of doing an oral application, so kind of an interview style application with one of us here. If you're interested in doing that, be sure to contact us a week before the grant deadline by February 14th, so that we can set up a time to do that. For everybody, as you're working through your application, the portal will save as you go. So don't worry about losing any of your work. But if you do want to print it out and have a PDF, there's a little button to do that called Application Packet. And you can also choose people to collaborate on the application with you, so you can add more people to be able to look at it and review. Nobody from Calgary Foundation will review your application as you're working on it. But if you email us and ask us to review a draft, we're more than happy to provide some feedback. So you can email us at the communitygrants@calgaryfoundation.org web email address, and then we will take a look at your draft and we'll enter comments right into it. In that as well, we ask you to do that about a week before the deadline, so by February 14th, if you'd like your draft reviewed. And just so you know, there's also an anonymous survey at the end there. So if you want to give us any honest feedback on the application process, there's a choice to do that for you there. So in terms of the timeline, applications are open now, so you could start working on it, and you need to submit by 4 p.m. on February 21st. We do expect to receive about 150 applications. We can't move forward with all of them, so we will create a bit of a short list, and we will let you know if you're moving to the next stage in the last week of April. Then the shortlisted applicants will meet with grant advisory committees, who are made up of volunteers from the community, and we host those meetings through the months of May and June, and make our decisions at the very end of June so that you know the decision by early July. One thing to note is that Calgary Foundation will only cover expenses for things that happen after our decisions are made. So you're looking at work happening in July and onward. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we assess applications. We do aim to be transparent in our work, and so you know what we're looking for. We do, as I mentioned, expect to receive many more applications than we can actually support given our budget. We'll likely be able to make grants to roughly a third of the organizations that submit. We know there's tons of important work out there, and these are pretty tough decisions to make. When you submit an application, it's assessed by multiple staff and volunteers. And those volunteers consist of different community leaders, sector experts, people with a variety of different lived experiences and experiences in the charitable and nonprofit sector and beyond. The assessment criteria we use really mirrors the questions that we ask in the application. Because we fund a broad range of things, from arts to the environment, software implementations, food security, we have to really keep our criteria quite broad to allow for the breadth of work that we try to serve. So keeping that in mind, here's some of the things we look for. There's a question to you about your rationale, so why you want to do the work. What we're looking for here is, have you explained the challenge that you're trying to address, or that strength that you're trying to build within your organization? And how did you arrive at the project you want to do? So be specific. We're looking for information that's pertinent to what the grant funds will help you to do, not sort of an overview of your organization's overall mission. That said, if your organization is moving into an area of work that's new to you, be sure to share how it connects to your mission. We also look to see how the community is really driving the work. So we really believe that the people who are impacted by the work that we do should be engaged in determining the response. So tell us about how you're listening to community as you're making your plans. Then we ask about delivery. So those are those activities you do. Tell us the plan. What we're looking for here is really just a well thought out plan that's appropriately resourced for what you want to do. The more detail, the better here. So for instance, if you're planning to host some workshops through the year, tell us how many, how often, who are they for, who are you expecting to come, and how are you reaching them? We also consider the timing. So make sure that you sort of left yourself enough time to accomplish what you hope to do. And Community Grants has 2 cycles per year, one now and then one coming up in September. So we do take into account what we need to fund now and what can maybe wait until our next cycle. Then we ask you about evaluation and success, so your desired outcomes. And here we're looking for a clear sense of the impact you hope to have over that proposed grant timeline. So if you have an evaluation strategy, be sure to share that. Or if there's other ways you're going to capture your learning so you know if you're successful in your plan, that's what we're looking for. Do also consider how you'll sustain the impact of the work past the grant period. And if you're applying for a grant to purchase something like new equipment, for instance, tell us if there's like a maintenance plan or sort of what happens after the grant period to make sure you can extend the benefit. If you're applying for a pilot program, or if it's like sort of a one-off thing, you can still tell us if it's something that you intend to roll out afterwards. I know it's difficult to answer the question about how you'll fund it, but tell us what the intention is to do after our grant. And the last question is around partnerships and relationships. So here we're really just trying to get a sense of how your work fits into the landscape of organizations that may be working in similar area. So information that you provide here should directly relate to the particular project that you're working on. Don't give us a list of everyone you know. Let us know who you're consulting with, who you'll share with, and what's informing this particular project. We definitely encourage coordination and collaboration. If a project sounds a little bit like another program that we know of, we may have some more questions for you around how you've talked to or how you've learned from those organizations. Even with internal things like a software implementation, it's great to know if you've chatted with any other organizations who've done something similar. I just wanted you to know we do list all of our previous grants on our website, so you can go and search those. You can even do a keyword search for types of projects that might be similar to yours. Finally, we do look at alignment with Calgary Foundation's vital priorities. And those are linked in the application, so you can learn more about them. And we also look for opportunities to support reconciliation and racial equity. And so those factors do come into our decision making. But as Bessie mentioned earlier, we fund all kinds of work. So including work that doesn't directly align with one of our priorities or is not related to racial equity, you're absolutely still eligible, and we want to hear what you're doing. We try to balance the number of grants we make across different sectors. So we consider, are we funding enough arts groups? Are we funding enough environment groups? Are we funding enough social service? And try to have some balance in every grant cycle. We also look at past support. So we consider like recent funding and try to think about how much we're spreading funds through the community. Really briefly, I will talk about reporting. Those who receive a community grant are required to submit a final report, and that's also done through our online grant portal. The reports require you to address the initiative outcomes, anything you've learned through doing the work, and a financial summary. So how did the budget that you planned at the beginning compare to what you actually needed to do by the end? You do need to complete any reports that are outstanding for community grants before you apply again. Okay, and just if you have any questions about reporting, our colleague Matt isn't here today, but his contact information is here. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to him. I'm going to touch really quickly on something that's in the application. There's a link there to our Community Knowledge Center. This is a directory that Calgary Foundation manages of Calgary charities and not-for-profits in our catchment area. And there's some benefits if you want to sign up for the Knowledge Center. It's not a requirement to apply, but we think there's some benefit, like showcasing your organization to Calgary Foundation's own donors and the wider community through the year. You also get some access to special resources, like for instance, there is a tips video in there about how to write a great application. So yeah, definitely not mandatory, but happy to help you with creating a CKC profile if you're interested. And that's it, Bessie, I'm going to pass it back to you and we can go to the Q&A.
Thanks, Ingrid. So that concludes our presentation section. So just before we go into the Q&A portion, I'd like to mention that we review the guidelines and application form at the end of each cycle to assess what worked well, what didn't, and what we can do better. So Calgary Foundation is a learning organization, and we always seek ways to better serve the community. So your input to our process matters, and we welcome your feedback. So if you can, as Ingrid mentioned, we do encourage you to complete the anonymous survey found at the end of the application form. The survey is not connected to your application in any way, and it's entirely optional. So we'll now go ahead with the Q&A portion of the presentation. Yes, please send your questions through the Q&A using the Q&A function, and we'll just read them out and hopefully answer your questions to your satisfaction. But if we don't, please definitely feel free to contact us either by email or through using the bookings link if you need clarification on anything that we've covered today. And also just a reminder to just try to keep your questions focused on what we've discussed today. You know, if there's anything specific about your initiative, please book some time with us and we'll be able to go over those in detail. Okay, so the first one, we have multiple centers of care for serving the community. So our overall operating budget is over 4 million. We have received funding in the past. Can we still apply for funding from community grants? So this is about the annual operating budget for existing programming. So so this applies to your organization as a whole, so not the individual centers that are situated across the country. So if it is over 4 million for the entire organization, you won't be eligible to apply for existing programming. So but you can apply for things related to new or expanded programming or capacity building. I hope that answers that question. If not, definitely send us a follow-up and we'll address that. Okay, so we have a grant whose report is not due until April. Can we still apply? Also, will that impact on application of a collaborative? Ingrid, would you like to answer that one?
Sure, yes. So if you already have a grant with a collaborative, you can still apply for your organization's own work. So every organization can have one grant that's for their own work, and then another grant with either a collaborative or in supporting a not-for-profit to apply. And there's a question there around sort of the reporting timelines. You do need to complete, so if you're applying for your own work and you've already got a grant for your own work, make sure you complete that report first before you reapply. Where there's overlap, so you mentioned that the report's not due till April. We do prefer not to have sort of an overlap for having you report a little bit early and then applying again. We don't want you to rush that initial project in order to be able to make another application. But it is something we'd be happy to chat with you about in a little more detail. So that might be something you book a conversation with us to talk about. Did that answer the question, Bessie?
Yeah, thanks, good. There's a question here from Janet. Janet, just wanted to let you know, I think it might be better for us to answer this question one-on-one. So if you could just follow up with one of us, we can answer that question because it's very specific to your case. Okay. So would people who suffer from addiction and are thus subject to the stigma associated, oops, sorry, that's jumped, associated with addiction be considered an equity deserving community? So when we talk about the disabilities community, so that includes physical, mental health issues. So the answer to that would be yes. Okay. So the next one, if we were to expand our addiction recovery center to provide short-term housing for those graduating from the program with nowhere to go, will this qualify? So I think, again, this is specific to your organization. Yeah, we'll need more detail about this work. So please feel free to book some time with one of us. And then we have, can Calgary Foundation assist with the budgeting part of the application? So it depends on what specific support you need with the budgeting part. So if it's how to fill in the budget form, yeah, we can definitely support you with, with that. But in terms of itemizing what things are going to cost, not particularly. So we can help you fill out the form and let you know what needs to go into that form. So if that's what you need support for, definitely contact one of us and we'll be able to help with that. How did the volunteers get selected? Are there openings to become a volunteer grant reviewer? So this is not particularly an application question, but yeah, so this is it's open. So we do that once a year, a call out, and the volunteers are from the community. So they might be people with expertise in that area or lived experience. And there's usually a call out for volunteers. And then they get called for an interview and, determine suitability. Ingrid, you want to add anything, or Dowdy, to that one?
Just to say, there is a link on our website. It's a little bit buried, but if you look under About Us and probably under committees, you'll find a link there that you can apply to be a volunteer. So we welcome anyone to apply. Unlike a lot of organizations, we're in a very privileged position to actually have more people who want to volunteer than we can actually accommodate. But we are more than happy to hear from you.
Thanks, Ingrid. So if we don't receive the entire grant, we can apply again in September. So the criteria for applying for any of our of the grants for subsequent grant is that the work that you've been approved for has been completed and the report has been submitted. So typically, if you were to apply in this cycle, the decisions are made June, so payments would get made in July. it's probably unlikely that that work would be completed by September. So you would need to wait till a future cycle when that work is completed before you'd be eligible to apply again. So whatever you've received funding for, whether it was partial or whether it was full, that work needs to be completed and reported on before you'd be eligible to apply for a subsequent grant. Okay. And then can you apply for the February 21st deadline if a project of last year is ongoing with the report to be submitted in March? So for that early reporting or any changes to reporting, I would encourage you to contact our colleague Matt or Princess, and they'd be able to look at your specific situation and see what you can do. Okay. Hi, I was wondering if there is any appeal process if the application gets declined. No, so decisions are final. We do provide feedback. So if your application has been declined, we do provide feedback to you to, advise you on maybe the kind of questions that came up or where you can strengthen the application or provide clarification on things that maybe were uncertain during the review process. But feedback is definitely something that we encourage applicants to try and book some time with us to discuss and to improve your application for a subsequent cycle. Yeah, and the next question, do you provide feedback for applicants? So yes, we do. If you are a post-secondary, could your student association be considered a collaborative? That's partnership collaborative. Anyone want to take that, Dowdy, Ingrid?
I can, Dowdy, if that's okay. We might want to talk about it a little bit more with you in person, but my sense is no. So the student association's work could potentially be a collaborative if you were also working with maybe another, young adult focused organization and another one to do a project together. But just being a sort of a collaborative organization generally, like the student association is, it doesn't quite fit what we mean by collaboration, which is multiple different organizations pulling together towards one common project or goal.
So thank you, Ingrid, for capturing the first. And so speaking to that, I think one of the great things, Kristen, that would be great if you'd book a meeting with us. Would be happy to talk more about maybe there's some information you'd like to share, but exactly what Ingrid said, that may not be a fit, but I think it's always great to book a meeting with us as we can also provide some additional context.
Thanks. So the next question is, as long as it's within the budget, can the project length be 3 years? I know the range you mentioned was 12 to 18 months, and to confirm the maximum available is 75,000. So this is about project length and maximum amount. Dowdy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thanks, Bessie. So yes, your project length could be up to 3 years. That is no issue. In terms of, to answer your question regarding the maximum available, we generally say the average request amounts for the community grant applications is between 70 and 75,000.
Thanks, Dowdy. So the next one is about, we say the more detailed, the better, and the character limits for its section doesn't always allow for that. It is very challenging to fit within these limits, even with the detail. So any suggestion? Okay, I'll touch a bit on this. Ingrid, also I'd like you to add on this. So it's really here, like we don't want every single detail about the project in there, but where you can, do provide that. So, you know, rather than general statements that, okay, we're going to serve the community, you know, just tell us more about that community and exactly, you know, what led to the response that you've chosen. So you for instance, yeah, our target population had input. So how did they have input? Just give us a little snippet so that if you're shortlisted to the face-to-face meeting with the committee, you can then go into as much detail as possible, you know, about that. And also this cycle, we've added an additional text box where, so you have the text box for the rationale, delivery, evaluation, and relationships. So we've added an additional text box where you can tell us something that, you know, wasn't able to be captured in any of those 4 boxes. So I will encourage you to utilize that space to be able to be specific in the information that you provide. Ingrid, you want to add to that?
No, I think that's great. And the other thing we'll just reiterate is ask us for feedback on the application, because sometimes we can find things that you can take out and other things you can expand on. And so, yeah, we're happy to try and help give some of that guidance one-on-one as well.
Okay.
And do the
great.
anonymous survey and tell us that's what you think.
Great. So we're almost coming up to time now. And the last one happened to be a compliment to say Cowgill Foundation does give great feedback if your application has not been successful. So I will definitely encourage you to, we're very accessible. You know, just book a time with us. We will talk about, you know, your project, your initiative, and you know, or could just contact us by email. We're very happy to answer any questions for that. And I think we've covered everything. Anything else that I'm missing? Okay. Right, that's great. So, so thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. So that concludes our session. And yeah, so we look forward to receiving your application and speaking to you about the process or how to make your application successful. So yeah, thank you for joining us today. Bye, everyone.